All right. My name is Justin Caldbeck. I was born and raised in Vermont. I left Vermont to go to college at Duke University, where I was an econ major. That's where I kind of started to fall in love with business and also played basketball there in the late 90s. And then started my career at McKinsey. Went up to McKinsey, which is really where I fell in love with the idea of working with tech companies. I happened to get randomly put on a tech project, very fortunately, in the late 90s, and loved it. And ultimately went up to Harvard for business school, came back down to McKinsey for a little bit over a year to pay off my loans. And then I knew kind of at that point that I wanted to do venture capital. And so went up to Bain Capital Ventures in Boston initially, where I was an analyst. I got promoted up through partner there. Worked on some really interesting stuff. Worked on the early investment in LinkedIn. I moved out west alone for Bain Capital in 2008 to open up their West Coast office. First person on the ground out here, which was pretty cool. Ended up hatching a company that is today a couple $1 billion company called Bloomreach. And then I got recruited over by Lightspeed as a partner there to kind of go help co-lead the consumer tech group. And there I led the early investments in Fix. I worked on other investments like Snapchat and Affirm. It was great. With a guy named Jonathan Teo, we ended up raising about $300 million across 2 funds, all really focused on early stage consumer tech. And then, as you know, left in 2017, which I can get into. And then right now I'm running an early stage seed fund. So I've got a bunch of limited partners in the US and throughout Europe and other parts of the world. And really, really love it. It's what I've fallen in love with.
And Justin, what is your secret to a good life?
Oh gosh, I've got a couple. So I think the first one that for sure to me is critical to having not just a good but a great life is figuring out who is your tribe, and ruthlessly prioritizing them. And for me, that starts with my wife and 4 kids. And I think it's become even more apparent to me during some of the more difficult times that you want to be surrounded by and invest in people that you love and who love you for who you are, not what job title you have or what success you've achieved or other things like that. And I think it's really easy for a lot of us to get caught up in, especially when things are going well, with people around them that appreciate you for the success you've had. But as you know, like when things are more difficult, a lot of those people flee. And so I think to me, a big part of having a great life is ruthlessly prioritizing those people and just being super thankful to be able to have the opportunity to invest in those relationships and prioritize time with those people. That's a huge one for me. Huge one.
Do you sit down and plan your week out and have your wife at the top of that list, and you're like, okay, I gotta serve her first. You fill in all the gaps in your calendar, right, with wife stuff, and then you go to your kids and you do that, or like how do you prioritize the things in your life? How do you systemize?
I don't always kind of go week ahead and fill out every time, but I do. Every week, I know here are the 2 or 3 things that I want to do with Sarah in terms of whether it's a date night or those kind of things, build around that. And then here are the days I'm going to make sure that I'm picking up the kids from school and I'm taking them to soccer practice and I'm watching soccer practice. And I'm taking them to basketball and I'm watching that. Or here are the practices that I'm coaching. Or here's the daddy-daughter date that I'm going on. And everything else, work-wise, is scheduled around that. Like I'm busy during those slots, and that wasn't always true, to be honest. Earlier in my career, it wasn't always like that. And I think that having that prioritization now, first of all, you said to a good life, like I'm way happier than I ever was before. inside because every day I get such rich time with those people in my life. And we, these are small things, but like we prioritize Halloween. We go trick-or-treating as a family. We don't go with a bunch of other folks, right? We really prioritize that time together. And so for me, that's made it a good life.
I gotta ask, did you dress up for Halloween this year?
I did. I was my wife and I were Mr. and Mrs. Incredible, which is given the age of the kids, even though it's a little bit dated, they still love it.
I was a creeper from Minecraft.
What were you?
We were all Minecraft characters.
Oh, really? Oh, my.
And I was a creeper. The baby was a chicken, and then our son was Steve, like the main character
awesome.
Kid. So much fun.
That's awesome.
It's funny that Halloween night, I had a lot of people who obviously weren't trick-or-treating texting me about the stuff that was going on with the business that was burning down.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, like stealing my peace, right? Like I even like I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket, and I was in a freaking onesie that looked like a character in a Minecraft video game. So I had to like unzip it and like dig into my phone and like pull it out, and I pulled it out, and it was just like negativity right in my face. We're like walking around trick-or-treating at the time, and my wife just immediately knows what's up.
Right.
And she's put the freaking phone away.
I'll tell you, I think that actually, this is an area I'm probably working more on, to be honest. I have not perfected in the same way I have the first part, I think, but trying to be present when you're with those people. And this is like the antithesis of present. That's right. Of being present. And it could be because you get those negative texts or emails about something stressful, but it just as easily could be because I'm with my kids at the dinner table and I'm scrolling through Instagram and I'm not paying attention to their story from the day, or I'm not engaging with them in the way that I could, right? And I think that's something that definitely is a struggle. Like I actively work on it, and it's something none of us dealt with growing up, because like there were, at least there were no mobile phones growing up. So when my family sat down for dinner, we were just conversing with each other, right? And I think that's something that I find myself much happier when I'm able to put it away and not think about it for an hour or two to be with them than if I'm scrolling and kind of passively engaging in not the way that I want to.
One of the things that's helped me in that regard is, number one, I use Reclaim, which has these little sections that they call them habits. It will block off the time on your calendar and play defense against other stuff that might be showing up on your calendar. And so I've got freedom goals, right? Because I have my life separated into freedom, finance, fitness, and family. And so I've got 2 hours every Saturday that's blocked off in the morning to only focus on those things that help our family achieve freedom. And the phone's off during that time. It's just like, having fun, basically, doing sound baths and stuff like that as a family. And I found that the phone specifically, I've tailored the different platforms to fit my specific needs. So TikTok, I've programmed it now, and occasionally they slip in a little bit of politics. It'll come up one thing and I'm just like, nope, algorithm, like get that away from me. Mm-hmm. And I just have a bunch of, which is just hopeful, wonderful videos about like families being reunited. Awesome. and like young kids helping people across
positivity.
The street. Yeah, positivity. So I've programmed that app now to, whenever I need a dose of positivity, I go to TikTok. So it's less of like I find myself doom scrolling, and I find myself intentionally going to the curated content that I've created on that specific platform, and I just consume the heck out of it. Instagram, I will say, is the least programmed of all of them, and it gives me the most junk. But I'm just a degenerate fool that loves all kinds of crazy stuff. And so Instagram is for connecting with people. And that's the need that I've positioned it for.
Yep.
So if I'm scrolling, it's purely for the curation of zany, meme stuff to send to friends that I haven't connected with in a while. relationships that are almost exclusively meme related at this point. I haven't seen these people in years, and it's just we have this. You hit that vein with some people, and it just carries you through to the end. And so, that has helped me in a big way get away from that distraction. But it's still a struggle, certainly.
Hard. I think it's hard, and I think it. I mean, look, my whole career has been around investing in technology, right? So I'm very bullish on technology, but there's no question that some of the impact of what are these social products designed in theory to increase connectivity with people end up really, I think in some ways harming the relationships closest to you, because you're so obsessed with what you're posting for other people, or you're just obsessed with consuming content from other people and other things, that it's easy for a lot of people to get in bed with the person that they love and spend 45 minutes just scrolling next to each other, as opposed to like talking about the day or anything
else. Yeah. Right? So I'm curious to get your thoughts on this as a tech investor, because the juxtaposition of technology and capitalism, right? We know that because these companies are publicly traded, they have to grow, right? In order to appease shareholders, they have to grow.
Yeah.
And it makes them almost parasitic, because that means that they're coming for every minute of your time, not because they're bad, not because they're inherently evil, but just because that is what the shareholders demand. And so do you see a social evolution coming from the technology space, where more of these products are going to be a little bit more social facing, more like purpose facing, and they're not going to focus so much on getting more attention from people? Or is the game not even close to changing, and we're still just battling on attention, and we're going to keep having Instagram and the metas of the world competing for more and more of our time? What do you think?
Look, I think I do think you'll see niches where social products pop up that are not exclusively designed to suck tons of time. So what's an example? Like, there's the addiction space, right? So you could imagine, and I just looked at one relatively recently, where, there are tools that allow you to engage with other people suffering through similar, addictive journeys, right? So it could be in a Clubhouse style audio format. It could be in other ways, but their goal is really not to have you sit there for hours and hours and hours just because of improving certain metrics. Their goal is ultimately to help you retain a lifestyle of sobriety, right? Now, those two are not in complete conflict, but, look, I think the reality is these social apps like Instagram or X or Facebook or Snap, like the reality is they want you to spend as much time as possible, because that's how they are, they're inserting into that some level of ad load, right? Which is how they're monetizing, which is what they're reporting to either private or public shareholders. And I don't see that going anywhere. And, candidly, I've seen so many over the years, apps or products that are designed to limit your phone use, right? And unfortunately, those are hard businesses.
They just all fail.
They all fail. Because they are the reality is if you want to limit this, you either decide to do it or you don't do it. And if you want to be using your product, if you want to be using your phone and the app that you downloaded is telling you not to, more than likely over time you're going to fail and you're just going to use it anyway. So I think that ultimately it just comes down to self-discipline. And the reality is, and this is kind of what I was speaking to earlier, is the reality is many people use it as an escape from their current life, right? I'm obsessing around these trips that friends are going on that I'm not getting to go on, or I'm looking at these people that I wish I was talking to, I wish I was engaging with, but I don't know. Like I'm escaping my current reality to do something else. or I'm spending tons of time trying to curate my current reality, give a better image to the world of what my life is like, right? But both of those suck good, positive energy away from the people closest to you, I've found. And that's a hard one. That is one I'm very much still working on.
I think we all are. When it comes right down to it, I think most people are losing the battle against these against the platforms for their attention. Right, the platforms win. It's just so damn interesting. There's just so much. I will say the ones that seem to have they have my vote. They haven't had my download yet, though. The ads aren't quite good enough. Is stop doom scrolling and start learning Stoic philosophy type apps, right? Yeah. Where you're replacing the activity with something that hits that dopamine receptor in the same way, but it hits it with a slightly different piece of content that is specifically curated for that need.
Yep.
It's as small as I realized this today. We take our son to jiu-jitsu Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then we have our class afterwards. And he goes into the back, and there's a TV back there with virtually unlimited access to YouTube. And what do the kids watch? What do you think? Garbage.
Yeah. Well, Minecraft videos or random.
That's all it is. Minecraft videos over and over and over. And since it's my account that's on there, I get to go through and see the watch history, and I'm like, ooh, not a good look.
Totally.
And so I'm thinking about no, I've already resolved to do this. I'm going to password that sucker, and it's going to be like all National Geographic and Bill Nye the Science Guy, from as much as I can. But those presents and the time, this time around, especially in your career with your family, you're more attentive to them. What advice would you give, somebody like me who's got young kids, who's trying to foster kind of the older traditions of like being at the table and being home? What advice would you give to me to make sure that I instill that in my family?
I think leading by example. Grew up with parents that were literally. I remember my dad one time going on a one day business trip to Boston. I grew up in Vermont. 1 day business trip to Boston, and outside of that, I can't remember a single dinner that my parents ever missed. And look, that's hard in some of these jobs, for sure. But I think that making sacrifices, right, in the sense of, hey, someone wants to grab work drinks, you're going to grab dinner, and whether it's after the kids are in bed doing a Zoom or trying to work around those so that they feel and see that they are the priority. You also have a career that you are grinding on during the day and when they're at school and things like that, and maybe late at night and early in the morning, to achieve what you want to achieve. But those limited windows of time with the kids, especially when they're young and it goes so quickly, showing them that they're the priority and that you make those sacrifices, I think is really, really important. You do realize ultimately, and maybe it's getting older, is you realize, like no one gives a shit about your like professional legacy. Very few exceptions, right? Who was the CEO of IBM in the 80s? No one, very few people.
It's not Jack Welch, right?
Right?
Dang it.
It was not Jack Welch, right? So that's kind of my point, is that was one of the biggest companies in the world. It may have even been the biggest at some point. And yet no one cares, right? And if that level of person is forgotten in the terms of their professional investment, then you better believe that most VCs running $100 million VC funds are not going to be remembered for that, right? And I think that, again, it doesn't mean to not be ambitious and to not be trying to achieve, but I think there's so many people that leave behind the people that believe in them and depend on them the most to try to get incrementally more, success or fame or whatever it is. And I just think that, when you're older, I think most people don't look back and say, oh, I wish I'd put those extra few hours into finding the 100th great company, right? Like they they want to look back and feel like they had lived a full life and lived and made an impact on people around them and built relationships with people around them that are still strong and have withstood the ups and downs because they invest in those, right? Something I always ask myself, which is maybe silly, but is I always ask myself, like, would these people be my friends if I was a school teacher or a dentist or any other kind of, more common job potentially, right? And I think that's a really important test. We may have some shared interests professionally, but I want to ultimately know that we can depend on one another regardless of where our career arcs go, because and prioritizations and things like that in common.
I think some of my best friends in this world only know what I do for a living because I've confided in them and the stressors that come from that job. And otherwise they couldn't care less. I got a buddy that visited yesterday. He is one of the best gift givers that I've ever met in my life.
That's cool.
Frustratingly so. I am just objectively in debt to him. And, people just write it off. Of course not. Like, love you so much, man. His name's Alvin. Shout out to Alvin Avila. He works at a bank. I don't think he really knows what I do.
Yeah.
And I would love to keep it that way.
I love that.
We just go get food, we hang out, we watch UFC fights. That's the cream of the of life.
It really is. I mean, I get back to Vermont at least once a year, and my best friend lives there and a number of other really close friends. And my favorite part is exactly that, is I go back and
you leave it behind.
We don't ever talk about work at all, right? And that's when you know that you've got real friends, right? Like that's, we're talking about family or sports or just random stuff, right? Like life. And that feels much better than the conversations you often get candidly in the Bay Area, which is like, what do you do? What firm? How much money have you raised? Like, what are the new deals you're looking on? Like, that kind of thing. So yeah. I like that. Yeah, I mean, feel free. I am on LinkedIn, Justin Caldbeck. Feel free to reach out there. I think that's probably the easiest place, I would say, typically to find me. You could get me on X at Caldbeck J. But I spend, checking both those frequently.
Thanks so much for coming on the show.
I had a great time.
This has been the Pulse Ox podcast. Please, if you found this episode valuable, give us a like on Spotify and share it with a friend.